Abby, so good to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, I guess we should just get right to it.
Yeah.
So, how do you meet with your sub-agent Tulsi Gabbard? Is there a drop somewhere? Like, how does it work? Do you have to leave your mailbox up and she drives past it? What's
Putin conjures us at the round table every morning and kind of gives us our talking points that we sift through, and then we kind of diversify from there and try to pretend like we're independent. But no, it works well so far. But I mean, it's kind of getting exposed more and more. Yeah, used to.
Do you get is there like a talking points? Is there like a book code somewhere that's like it's like every fourth word in the third story of the Washington Post, right? But you have to use like a I don't know, like a Tom Clancy novel to figure out where to start the code and all that.
Yes. And you have to do it like a nesting doll, a Matryoshka doll, like that's the space.
Right.
I'm a Matryoshka doll away
if the nesting doll fits.
Oh my God, I can't even believe that.
What do you think about this?
Well, I left RT actually 2 years before the DNI report, but yet my show Breaking the Set was actually included in the DNI report as part of this whole like Russian propaganda effort to usurp American democracy.
Right. You intervened. You caused the Donald Trump election because you covered fracking, Occupy Wall Street.
Occupy Wall Street. Talked about Hillary Clinton. Issues that RT fills a very necessary void, which is why it's popular. And which is, the corporate media obviously fails in doing. So yeah, it's easier, I guess, to call everything a Russian disinfo operation. But I mean, it's just so cartoonishly embarrassing, because if anyone knew how actually RT operated, they would know that a lot of people have just complete editorial freedom, which is what I had. Chris Hedges, Lee Camp, a lot of people on the network do whatever they want.
Right.
But it scares them.
Can you give us, just before we get into everything we're going to get into, just a short kind of trajectory of your career, because you've done a lot of interesting things, and I want to make sure listeners understand the arc of it.
Sure. So I started off doing citizen journalism, reporting on, I was a board member of Project Censored, which is like the largest research organization in the country that publishes a book of the top 25 censored stories every year. Then I covered Occupy Wall Street. I was in Oakland at the time, and this police state kind of apparatus just showed up in my backyard. And so I was there covering it, and Russia Today was the only network that was actually taking it seriously and covering the protests. And so I kind of became the liaison.
This is an important point. I want to stop you there, because the DNI, when they did that intelligence assessment, part of the whole conceit of it was they're really harping on the negatives of American society, and you're seeing this coverage of Occupy Wall Street. There's nowhere else to get it, right? I mean, I think if there would be a lot of people who would be covering this stuff if there was an appetite for it in the corporate press.
Right, they'd be covering at places other than RT.
Right.
Like they're sent to RT because nowhere else will let them cover it. So
and they called me someone who was fomenting radical discontent for simply covering issues fomenting.
Wow.
So fast forward a year later, and I was offered Breaking the Set, which was the daily kind of media critique show, and where I was deconstructing just media propaganda. And I was an anti-imperialist journalist who kind of wore my bias on my sleeve. But again, we know that these views are not entertained in the corporate media, and so they have to just malign anyone associated with RT. And it has become so absurd, though. I mean, this NeoMcCarthyist hysteria now, where Jill Stein, simply for attending that dinner, and she did it because RT was the only one who gave third parties a platform.
Right.
And she was like, okay, and she paid for her own way, and she went to this dinner, and now she just incessantly maligned by Neera Tanden and all these Democratic operatives as being a Putin. What did Hillary Clinton say? She said absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
100%.
Totally.
100%.
By the way, we have to make sure we cut in the Neera Tanden horse neighing sound from Young Frankenstein.
Oh, right. That's
reminds
part
you
of
that every time you hear her name. Yeah. But so you were, before we get into the neo-McCarthyism, so you were at RT. Breaking the Set.
Yes.
Then you went to Telesur to do
Empire Files. So I left RT after 3 years before all of this kind of really came to a head, which is just fascinating to see how it's evolved. And then I joined Telesur, which is a Venezuelan, Cuban, a lot of Latin American conglomerates that started by Fidel Castro, Hugo Chavez, to kind of combat this corporate media hegemony that was usurping their democratic processes. And unfortunately, after 3 years of working at Telesur, which we were just selling a show to, an investigative series that basically viewed issues through the lens of U.S. empire, the thing that's kind of always missing from the analysis of domestic and foreign issues. And Trump's sanctions on Venezuela shut down the ability for Telesur to pay people outside of the country, outside of Ecuador and Caracas. So
Telesur is also, it's had problems with the internet platforms too, hasn't
Absolutely.
it? It's been periodically shut off of Twitter and Facebook. I can't remember which ones exactly.
No, absolutely both. I mean, and dozens of, if not hundreds of like pro-Maduro accounts that are completely not associated with the government whatsoever have just been absolutely purged from social media.
Right.
So anyone who's deemed a U.S. enemy is just purged and just kind of drops off the face of the earth.
And I feel like, not to digress on this too much, but when the whole fake news controversy started coming up here in the States, a lot of people in the States didn't really care about it, but if they would if they looked overseas. And you report on Gaza too. That's another place where where internet sites have been kind of taken off some of these platforms. I mean, this is kind of the model of what the press might be going forward, right? Where these platforms, they kind of have a relationship with governments, and they just sort of decide to selectively take some things off the net, right?
Absolutely. I mean, this whole Russia hysteria and also the fake news mantra has basically been a coordinated effort on behalf of the foreign policy establishment, with working with these think tanks like the Atlantic Council, who are stacked with just defense contractors, NATO, and all these things, to essentially, again, like, purge dissident voices online, whether it be Venezuelan, whether it be, the Syrian voices that they don't like. I mean, basically anyone who's dissenting against, no, it's pretty outlandish. And again, this is just all done under the banner of fighting fake news and fighting Russian propaganda. And it's become very ridiculous because Google changed its algorithms, and you've reported extensively on this. I mean, Counterpunch, left organizations and left websites that used to get traffic on the front page of Google are now completely shunned.
Even like alternate media men,
absolutely.
Not exactly radical leftists.
And our views too. Empire Files on YouTube, which is 100% grassroots funded and has been for the last year and a half, is age-sensitive content bans, just mass flagged. I mean, it's just basically completely restricted online.
So now you're totally independent.
100%.
And you've been doing that since you were at Telesur.
Yeah,
since leaving Telesur.
So we left Telesur a year and a half ago after the sanctions shut it down, and now we're 100% donor funded. You
also, by the way, your Wikipedia page is, in fact, we have to have you on and rewrite it. Can we make some edits? It's full of either like very judgmental smearish things or outright falsehoods.
Yeah, because corporate media reigns supreme. So smears and slanders in the corporate media to undermine my journalism. To call me a Russian agent or conspiracy theorist is basically overshadows all the other work I've done for the past 10 years.
Not to harp on this too much, but what do people at RT? I mean, there must be in the last 3 years. I know you haven't been there, but the stress of all this has got to be a pretty serious thing for people who work there, right? Because of course it's going to impact your ability to work anywhere else in the future.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And what do people talk about? When they discuss this off the air. I mean, the FARA
thing really was meant to really scare people. A lot of people fled because they didn't want to deal with the Foreign Registration Act for RT, essentially. And, of course, we're not doing this to the BBC. We're not doing this to Al Jazeera. They did this to Press TV as well, so kind of outright shut down Press TV. So it was very scary. A lot of people and my colleagues working at RT were extremely terrified. Having to register as a foreign agent. And of course they know that they're being spied on. I mean, there's probably spies working there and surveilling them and stuff like that. So it's a really ridiculous culture of fear and censorship going on, kind of self-censorship almost for RT employees right now.
Right. Yeah, that's like the scarier part of it sometimes, right? Is that it's not overt, it's not like written. You talk about this, right? I mean, at many places, it's not like they go through it with a red pen.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's in your mind.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's very.
No, I mean, one other quick story is I spoke out on air to kind of assert my editorial freedom, which I spoke to my superior, and he was like, "Go ahead." And before we wrap up the show, I wanted to say something from my heart about the ongoing political crisis in Ukraine and Russia's military occupation of Crimea. Just because I work here for RT doesn't mean I don't have editorial independence, and I can't stress enough how strongly I am against any state intervention in a sovereign nation's affairs. What Russia did is wrong. I admittedly don't know as much as I should about Ukraine's history or the cultural dynamics of the region, but what I do know is that military intervention is never the answer, and I will not sit here and apologize or defend military aggression. Furthermore, the coverage I've seen of Ukraine has been truly disappointing from all sides of the media spectrum and rife with disinformation. Above all, my heart goes out to the Ukrainian people, who are now wedged as pawns in the middle of a global power chess game. They're the real losers here. All we can do now is hope for a peaceful outcome for a terrible situation and prevent another full-blown Cold War between multiple superpowers. Until then, I'll keep telling the truth as I see it. Have a good night, everyone. I'll see you back here to break the set tomorrow. The next day or two, this woman resigned live on air. Her name was Liz Wall. And to kind of, undermine what I had done and say, no, RT is a big propaganda network. And it came out that that was actually a coordinated stunt by Bill Kristol's think tank.
What?
Jamie Kirchick was working
Love
with her
that man.
to launch this whole propaganda campaign to parade her around and basically puppeteer her, marionette this woman to discredit RT and discredit my kind of asserting the editorial freedom. It was fascinating because all the media bought it. She went on the Colbert Report. She went all across the mainstream media, and she's kind of known as the hero who quit live on air. And she had no story. She had no story of what was actually the propaganda that was controlling the narrative. She had nothing to say, actually.
So that was a Bill Kristol thing? He put her up to it, basically?
So Jamie Kirchick at FPI, Foreign Policy Initiative, which was Bill Kristol's think tank, it was the reiteration of PNAC. And they were tweeting right before she quit saying, tune into RT, something big's about to happen, tune in, tune in. Max Blumenthal and Ron Ucalek actually wrote a really great article in Truthdig that exposes this, how she was stage managed by neoconservatives. And Eli Lake was involved.
Ooh.
And
He said I was funny once on Twitter.
And all of a sudden she just had this giant media tour lined up to discredit me and kind of go with that narrative. And
Bill
it was
Kristol,
fascinating.
He's like proof positive. You can be wrong about literally everything and just keep kind of having a job forever.
Now he's a resistance hero.
Yeah,
who knew?
exactly.
David Frum. I mean, who
oh my gosh,
the fuck are these people? They're just so rebranded gross. Forever.
Yeah.
He had some choice
Rubin.
words this weekend after the Tulsi thing. You just see that?
No, what did he say?
He tweeted. He basically said something to the effect of, because Trump tweeted about Tulsi Gabbard and he called Hillary crazy. Trump is pretending that they're not all on the same team. Him and Tulsi basically, and
as if Bill Kristol's not on the same team as
I
mean, John Bolton was a founding member of PNAC, so it's
okay.
What's PNAC? I just want to make sure.
Project for New American
Century. They're the ones who talked about how great the invasion of Iraq would be, right?
Oh yeah.
That was great. Yeah,
it's like John Bolton is so close with these people.
Right.
He's probably like buds with Bill Kristol. I mean, it's just unbelievable that they're trying to distance themselves from them and be like, oh, they're on a different team. No, man, you're all on the same team.
So just quickly before we move on to Gaza, what did you think about Hillary's thing last week?
I mean, look, it's narcissistic personality disorder. I mean, it's really, it's an illness.
Do you think she believes it?
That's what I was wondering.
I think that she might, because she can't accept reality. She can't face reality. But then again, it's like, how could you believe it? There's no evidence whatsoever. There's no foundation built upon this ridiculous narrative, and the neo-McCarthy hysteria. So I don't know. That's a really good question, but all we know is that she hasn't accepted any sort of responsibility or accountability about why she lost. And really the blame lies squarely on her. Of course, you can talk about the media giving Trump countless hours and everything else, but really Hillary was the worst possible candidate that we could have had.
That was her big quote the night of the election, was they were never going to let me win. Remember, that was the Amy Chazik's reporting about all that.
That night where they chose to blame it on Russia over pizza? Yeah,
basically. I mean, but the one quote that they managed to wrangle out of that whole scene, because it's pretty unclear what the initial...
and this punching down and punching left of Jill Stein, who is a friend of mine, and just third parties, it's like they want to perpetually trap us in this two-party system, this prison, and just perpetuate their own privilege. And it's really grotesque. It's really grotesque that you can continue to blame Jill Stein. I mean, look at how many people don't vote. The same amount of people didn't vote than did for Hillary and Trump put together.
Also, you saw this interesting thing where people were like, we don't need you third-party voters, you're terrible, go fuck yourselves. Yeah. And then they blame it on them.
And your Russian assets.
Like if you think that these people caused the election to go to Trump, then why are you once again shitting on them? Like you need to convince people to vote.
No, they
choose a narrative.
They think that just we owe them our votes every single time, and it's like you are facilitating. Like I just saw Samantha Powers saying this. Like if Jill Stein weren't in the race, we would get all the votes. It's like, no, you wouldn't though, because we didn't want to vote for Hillary. I'm sorry. You were overseeing genocide in Yemen that you tried to rewrite in your book. Like, let's not rewrite history, Samantha. Yeah, let's talk about what Obama was instrumental in.
If they sucked 5% less, they might get 5% more votes, right?
Or, Ben Jealous, who debated Jill Stein on Democracy Now! And is not sympathetic at all, was like, people stop blaming this on Jill Stein because a lot of the people who voted for her wouldn't have voted for Dems anyway.
Exactly.
It's not like she sucked those things away.
Well, they did exit polls about that. They've already, they've shown conclusively that it wouldn't have changed the situation.
Can you imagine?
Exactly.
But who doesn't know that is apparently like Rachel Maddow, all of MSNBC.
No. This is the same thing. Ralph Nader is still maligned more than Bush is.
Yeah,
seriously,
exactly.
People have accepted him back in the fold, but they're still like, but fuck Ralph Nader.
Right.
You're like, what is wrong with you?
Ellen should go see a baseball game with Ralph Nader.
She gave that golden chandelier or the baby carriage with the chandelier on it to Trump. Have you seen that obscene, ostentatious fucking chandelier, like baby carriage that was given to Melania Trump? And Ellen gave him that.
What?
So it's like they're all in this club together.
No, that's great.
Yeah,
I love
we should put Trump in it. Melania, like, drive him around in that. That'd be amazing. Give it to David Vitter. He has a diapers fetish.
Really?
Yeah, apparently it's a diapers fetish. So,
I think,
we'll have
really
to make a bigger
rich
model
people
of
with
it.
bad politics have really bizarre, interesting sex
They
lives.
do, If only they could run on those.
Yeah.
What a boring friend to have, George Bush. Like, why?
I know.
Oh my God.
He's a great painter, though. Have you seen his paintings?
Oh, yeah. The one of him in the bathtub that he
Amazing.
scrubbed from the internet. The one of him, like, naked in the bathtub with his
see
feet.
that.
Yeah, remember that? With his, like, face. It's like this abstract one where he's, like, his face is in the mirror in the shower. He painted a lot of shower paintings before the dead soldiers.
Well, he painted
which is up
Putin.
at the Kennedy Center right now.
He painted Putin.
Yeah, the Putin one is good. It's got that kind of like, it's like too flat. It's like a Hieronymus Bosch.
Yeah. He likes Putin. He talks about how Putin and his dog had a dog.
His soul.
Yeah, he saw great humanity there. So I just want to read one of my favorite responses to Hillary's insane attack on Tulsi was from Cory Booker. Cory Booker's response to
that was
this
trash.
Was a gif of him going like this.
Yeah.
First of all, he looks insane, but that's his look. We've talked about this before. He's a cannibal. He will eat you. That's one of his "he will eat you" faces, which is why he's.
I like it. I mean,
I
don't feel negative about it at all.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what Matt said. And Matt said he wants a president who looks like he will eat you, which is why we want him to run with Buttigieg, because he's a woodchuck. He resembles a woodchuck, so they're very kind of toothy.
And he's more aggressive lately.
Yeah.
He's got that kind of like woodland critter.
Yeah.
It's like really bad now.
So it's "we will eat you."
Yeah, we will eat
Buttigieg,
you.
Booker 2020.
Yeah.
So he tweets this thing, right? As in, like, it's a totally gaslighting thing, right? He responds to Tulsi's response to Hillary Clinton, which is totally fair. And he, with a gif of him going like that, as if it's like she's crazy. Then Hillary. It gets worse.
I saw that.
Dan Savage things gets better. Well, this gets worse. Hillary Clinton tweets back at Cory Booker this gif of herself from 2016 from a debate, and she's like, okay, how delusional do you have to be?
Well, first of all, it's hilarious that presidential politics is high school now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, this is I think even high schoolers would be embarrassed by that level of social media behavior.
Yeah, Trump,
right?
I'm sorry. Trump is terrible. He's very good at social media.
He's a great
I'm sure he's
tweeter.
rolling his eyes. He's like, Hillary is Jesus. She could learn a lot from me if she paid attention. Okay, this is a debate from an election she lost, and she thinks that this is an own. She's like, haha, Tulsi's crazy. This just looks so gross and narcissistic, as you said. And I really try to avoid that narrative because there's so much misogyny, not in you or anyone who says it, but it's such a misogynist trope. But you can't really avoid it when the person is a narcissist. In fact, I'd be misogynistic and sexist to deny her that diagnosis. Yeah. Because I'd be invisibilizing her and erasing her, and then I'd have to touch the woke button.
The woke button.
It's right there.
It's just the entitlement.
It's the entitlement of like basically doing a high school like high five on Twitter, using an image from this debate that was from an election. Like this is a face where you think you're a winner and you lost to Trump. This is your face from the election that gave us Trump. Like, no, you don't get to be like, ha, ha, ha.
So, should we talk about Gaza? So you've got a movie out,
Yes.
Gaza Fights for Freedom, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us about, first of all,
good.
The concept of it was really like, so when you went, what's the history of this project? Because I thought it was really interesting the way it came out, and what was the reason that you did it in the first place?
Yeah, and I have to say that this is a huge news story. It's been going on since March 30th, 2018, and virtually no media has covered it. And when they have, it's kind of been giving way too much kind of credence to the Israeli propaganda machine and diminishing the voices of Palestinians who are being, targeted, killing and whatnot. So the Great March of Return popped off on March 30th, 2018, kind of in the midst of just this egregious humanitarian crisis that's going on in Gaza, the world's largest open-air prison. 2.2 million Palestinians live there, 75% of whom are refugees, and half of whom are children.
Wow.
So keep in mind, this is a war against kids. Even the UN reports that by the year 2020, there's no water. Like, water will have run out.
80% are living off foreign aid food supplies, right?
Yep.
I mean, it's insane.
It's insane. I mean, 25% of all illnesses are directly caused from toxic water because they can't rebuild the desalination plants. And so this is a caged population who's just been relentlessly bombed and collectively punished ever since Hamas, of course, won that election in 2006. Prior to that, Israeli forces were militarily occupying it in a brutal martial law, which is still what the West Bank is under. So we were in the West Bank in 2017, me and my partner Mike Preisner, who runs the Empire Files with me, and we filled out all the proper credentials, paperwork to get into Gaza. This is a humanitarian crisis that American taxpayers are spending $10 million every single day to sponsor these atrocities. And Ron Paus, the foreign press minister under Israel, basically outright denied me. They called me a propagandist, not a journalist. And they also called me an Iranian agent, which I thought I was a Russian agent.
Yeah.
That was a new one for me. I was like, am I a Venezuelan agent or a Russian agent?
Yeah,
now I'm an Iranian agent.
You are an internationalist, Abby, so it would make sense that you'd be working for multiple governments.
So it actually worked out really well because I Skyped into a session of Gaza journalists when the Great March of Return started, and they were just like, can we work with you on a Empire Files episode about the Great March? And so I directed these interviews of victims who were being killed, and this includes not only scores of civilians and children, females and males. This march is being led by a lot of women, contingents of Gazan women that you never hear from, but also protected categories of the Geneva Conventions: children, press, medics, and disabled people. And so once I got the footage back, it was so cinematically brilliant that I thought, I cannot just put together an Empire Files episode. We have to put together a full feature-length documentary film, and that's what we did for the last 8 months or so.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's like it was sort of really high-res, like slow motion stuff. I mean, it doesn't look like a typical political documentary.
Exactly.
It has almost it has like a. It's almost like Koyana Statsky or one of those old,
it's
amazing cinematography.
People need to watch Samsara and Baraka too. That shit's so good. But yeah, no, that's what I felt. I felt like to do this justice, to really do this story justice, we had to really put the effort into it.
Because there's so many anti-war movies that are great, but they, no one has the funding who's making an anti-war movie to have like a beautiful cinematographic film. So this was like, I have to say, I was in the movie theater. I saw it at a screening, and I was like this the whole time. I was like, and I'm pretty critical of Israel, but I have to say I was so angry, and it changed the way I saw it. Like, I now honestly think there's just like no hope. There's no hope for any two-state solution. I'm sure you were there before, a long time before I was. But and you know what else made me realize? Like, everyone likes to talk about how nuanced it is, shades of gray. What's so fascinating about this story is that because it's related so directly to international law, and there's a border, it's not complicated. It's black and white. Israel, and what I appreciate that you didn't, it was less polemical than a lot of things, or it could have been, but you just laid it out. Israel violates the international law this way, this way, this way, this way. So it's, I feel like people who aren't that critical of Israel could be affected by this film in a way that
I have my own personal opinions about this, and going to the West Bank, seeing the atomization by settlements, and kind of seeing the impossibility of what would the two-state even be at this point, and Israeli officials have laughed off that notion, I think, since the Oslo Accords, which Elizabeth Warren on the other hand says this is the official Israeli state policy for the last 7 years. No idea what she's talking about.
Well, everyone says that, but they don't mean it, right? That's just they pretend
But no, and so my opinions aside, I wanted to structure this entire documentary under just the structure of international law violations. I mean, anyone who watches this, if you believe in the if you believe in humanitarian law, if you believe in basic human rights, and if you believe in the Geneva Conventions, if you believe in the Hague Conventions, a lot of these things have been decided a century ago, decades ago, by the international community. You cannot kill unarmed people who pose no imminent threat. You cannot target children.
Exploding bullets, the gas.
Oh my God,
absolutely.
the exploding bullets, yeah.
And the gas things are amazing because